Daniel here for Tabletop for One. Please join me at the table as I teach and play through Horizons of Spirit Island. And I thank you for joining me for this tutorial and solo playthrough of Horizons of Spirit Island, a game by R. Eric Roos and published by Greater Than Games. Now, I have done previous tutorials for Spirit Island, but none for Horizons of Spirit Island. And recently, I noticed that some people had asked for a Horizon-specific tutorial. And so when I saw it on sale for $15, I thought, well, hey, I'll just pick it up just to make the tutorial. I never planned on buying the Horizons version of it because I think I have plenty of content that I currently own. But for this tutorial, I decided to pick it up. And I'm actually going to play it kind of blindly. I really haven't looked at this spirit or its cards to see how it's going to play out. And so this will be a blind game. Now, I've played plenty of regular Spirit of Island, so I think I will fare, fairly well. We'll see. But let's go ahead and get to the setup here. Now, in Spirit Island, you are a godlike spirit of the island trying to repel invaders and protect the land. Sometimes that involves protecting the native inhabitants, called the Han, from being attacked and destroyed. But you're also trying to protect the land from being corrupted by the invaders. And so the first part of setup you're going to do is choose a spirit. You're also going to choose how many spirits you're going to play. For this playthrough, I will do one spirit, but you could choose as many as you want. I highly recommend starting out with one or two, just because the mental upkeep for doing multiple spirits can take a bit of energy. And so I've decided on this spirit, the Rising Heat of Stone and Sand. And like I said, never played this spirit before, but I really haven't done a fairly offensive spirit in a tutorial, so I thought I'd pick this one up. On the other side here, it's going to tell you about the spirit. It's going to tell you its play style here, and it'll tell you where to put your starting presence on the board. And it tells you what cards you start with and how much energy. It also gives you a summary here at the bottom of what it focuses on. This one is primarily offense, but it has some control, defense, and utility, and very little fear. So it looks like we'll be focusing mostly on destroying the invaders. Now I'm going to let you know that I'm going to set everything up here to show you how setup works, but I am going to zoom in on the land and on my player board just to get better focus on those things, and I will rearrange everything to make it easier to see everything. Now for the Rising Heat of Stone and Sand, you have to put two of your presents, which are these little wooden discs, on the highest number of sands. Now on this board here, there are actually two island boards that you have in play. If you are playing solo, you're going to choose one of these boards. And if you need to, you can mark off which board is not used by placing fear tokens on all the lands there. But I'm just going to use the bottom board here. I'm not going to mark anything off. But I'm going to place the two of the presents here in the highest numbered sands here. You'll set aside these three tokens for use later. And then you're going to put presents on all of these circles here on your board except the far left two circles here. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look for this card here. This is called a power progression. And what it does is it gives you kind of an intro to this particular spirit. And so you're going to set aside these cards. These are going to be your power cards that you're going to gain during the game instead of drawing cards from the deck. And so it tells you here, when you gain a power card, take the next card on the list instead of the usual draw 4 and keep 1. And of course, after you gain a major power, you must lose another power of your choice, which could be the major power that you gained. So just keep that in mind. So what I do is I set up that entire deck, and you'll see here, we have Visions of Fiery Doom, followed by Drought, Purifying Flame, Indomitable Claim, Encompassing Ward, Talons of Lightning, and Land of Haunts and Embers. And so I could just keep in this stack here. And so now the next card that I will be drawing will be the first one on the list, the Visions of Fiery Doom. And so we'll set this aside here for now. And you won't need this card the rest of the game unless you need to reference it. You'll also take the 4 power card that have your spirits back on here. And these will be your starting 4 powers. You're going to take a random 9 fear cards, and you'll place 3 on the bottom, followed by the terror level 3 card here, 3 in the next spot, followed by a terror level 2, and 3 on the top. And you can place these up here in the fear deck section. And then to make up the invaders deck, you're going to have a random 3 level 1 cards on top of a random 4 level 2 cards on top of a random 5 level 3 cards. And you'll set these here. That means you'll have one of each that go back in the box. And then for your blight pool here, it's always 5 blight per player. The blight are these tokens here, plus 1. So 5 plus 1, making 6. As printed here, this is for 2 players. It's 5 plus 5 plus 1. But for a solo player, just 1 spirit, you're going to do 5 plus 1. And then all you need is 4 fear markers. You'll place this in the fear pool here. And then you're going to populate the board based on the symbols printed here. So this one shows a Dahan here. Dahans are the little huts, or the mushroom people as some people call them. We have 2 here, and I'll just stack them. And let's see, we got 2 more here and 1 here. Then you'll add 1 city to the board, and it goes in this spot here. You'll notice that there's always a city on the coast. And the city is denoted by the 3 buildings shown here. You'll add 1 town to the board, as it printed here, and that's the 2 building 1. And then 1 blight to the board, as shown here. And the last thing you do for setup is you're going to flip over the top card of the Invader deck, and it says that it's going to explore into mountains. You'll see it says explore down here. And what explore means is you look on the board, and if there are any cities or towns that are on that particular terrain or adjacent to them, they're going to send an invader, an explorer, into those areas. So you take these little guys here, and you'll send one into that area. So this city explores into these mountains here. And then this town here is going to explore into the mountains that it's currently in. And then you'll slide this card over here, and that tells us that in the mountains, the next turn, they're going to build. All right, so I zoomed everything in here. I'll have my blight pool right here, my fear pool here, and any fear I gain, I'll drop down here. We have our victory condition here, and then our fear deck here. Now let me tell you about the goal of the game. The goal is, of course, to get rid of the invaders. And you'll have your victory conditions up here. The victory conditions currently show that you must get rid of all invaders. And then there are victory conditions that get modified as you go through your fear deck, where all you need to get rid of is towns and cities, or finally just towns. And then if you get all the way through the fear deck, then you win the game. And the way you lose the game is if you run out of blight from the blight board, all your spirit presence is gone from the board, or you run out of the invader deck, meaning you run out of time. Alright, so let's talk about how the gameplay flows. You'll notice on the board here it tells you the phase order. We have the spirit phase, which is growth, gain energy, play, and pay for powers. Then we go into this fast power phase, which is represented by the bird here. And then we have the invader phase of fear, ravage, build, explore, and advance invader cards. And then the final phase here is the slow power phase. And then time passes. When time passes, the invaders in Dahan, they'll heal energy and that sort of thing. And so we're going to first talk about the growth. At the beginning of each round, you're going to choose a growth option. Sometimes spirits will have 2, but this spirit says pick 1. So you're going to pick one of these sets here. They're blocked off by a little line here. So this is 1 set here, 1 set here, and 1 set here. So you get to choose 1 set, and you get to do everything in that set. Now the first one here is reclaim cards. See, when you play cards, they get set aside, and you can't use them again until you reclaim them. This here says that you gain 1 power card, and we will gain 1 power card off of our deck of cards here that we had set aside. But if you normally play without that deck, you'll draw 4 cards from one of the power decks, and then choose one of those cards to keep. If you gain a major power card, you have to forget 1 power and lose that power for the game. The next one here tells you that you gain energy, and so in this case you gain 1 energy. And these 2 here tell you to add presence. It says add presence to sands or mountain, and that's up to 3 spaces away. And so when you add presence to a land and it tells you the distance here, that's 3 spaces away from where you currently have presence. So for us, that's going to be no issue. We start out in the middle of the board. And so this mountain is 1 space away. This mountain here is 2 spaces away. You just count the lands in between. And this sands over here is 2 space away. So we will be able to add our presence as much as we want in those areas, and that won't be an issue. So this one allows you to add 2 presence. Now you can add one to one sands and one to another mountain. And so it could be 2 different lands total. And on top of that, wherever you place the first one, you can use that as the starting point for the second one if you wanted to. Again, that doesn't matter in this particular scenario, but just to let you know that. Once you place one, now you have another place that you can start from and count range for the second one. Now this one here again is gain a power card, but add 1 presence 1 space away, and that's to any land 1 space away from where you currently have presence. And this one here is gain 2 energy. All right, so once you've chosen a growth option and gone through and done everything on the growth option, you will then be able to gain energy as shown here on the far left. Actually, the one that's most revealed. So if we had revealed these 3 here, you would gain 3 energy, not 1. On top of that, this one in particular shows you that you gain an earth essence. I will explain essences in a little bit, but that's particularly useful. Next, you get to play cards. You get to choose cards that you want to play, and you get to play them. Now, starting out with this spirit, you only get to play 1 card. But as you unlock, you'll get to play 2, 3, 4, or even 5 cards. And this one also unlocks a fire essence here. So there are some good options to play a lot of cards. And it seems like this particular spirit wants to play a lot of cards. Before I go on to playing cards, I want to talk about some of these rules here. So you'll notice here it shows a stack of presence symbols here. That's referred to as a sacred site. When you have 2 or more presence in 1 land space, it's a sacred site. And so that is a requirement for a lot of cards. You'll notice it here. And so you got to have sacred sites, particularly for this spirit. Not all spirits need them necessarily, but a lot of cards require them. And so in this one here, it says, wherever you have a sacred site, invaders have -1 health, and that's to a minimum of 1 health. That's really useful. And also here, we have what is called an innate power. I'm going to come back to this innate power because it involves playing cards. So I'll show you that in just a moment. All right, when you're choosing to play cards, you're going to first look at the top here. This is going to tell you your cost and whether it's a fast or slow power. So the red ones here are fast, again matching up with the red bird here. And the blue ones here are slow, matching up with the blue turtle. And of course the cost matters because it depends on how much energy you have to pay, because that's what you have to pay to play the card. So if you're playing multiple cards, you have to have a decent amount of energy. Now when you're playing a card, you need to take into consideration its speed, its range, and its target. Now this one tells you here it's a slow power. What that means is that it's going to act after the invaders have acted. So slow powers tend to be very powerful because it's kind of like you're powering up to do a big move or big damage. But it also allows the invaders to move, build, attack, and stuff like that before you have the chance to deal with them. So you have to plan these accordingly. They're definitely worth it because they help like manipulate the land and deal a lot of damage, but you have to plan for the fact that they happen later in the round. Now the target land here says any, and some of these don't. So this one here says target another spirit. Now in the case of the solo mode, when you're playing by yourself, it's going to be yourself that you target here. So this card here is a fast power. It says target another spirit. You'll target yourself, and then the target spirit gains 2 energy. Or a target spirit may pay 1 energy to do 1 damage in one of their lands. So that's what that particular card does. But the rest of these here have any target. Sometimes the target will be a target of a Dahan, a land with Dahan in it. Sometimes it'll be a target of a land with blight in it. Or sometimes it'll be mountains or sands or jungles or something like that. So definitely pay attention to the target. Now the range works the same way. You'll notice there's a range 1 here, 2 here from a sacred site, and a 2 here. And so that's always from your presence. Of course, the sacred site requires you to be casting it from a sacred site. So like in this one here, I have a sacred site here with my 2 presence. And if I cast it from here, I could target a land up to 2 spaces away. And that's virtually any land on this island board here. This other one says 2 spaces away, and that's just 2 spaces away from any presence. So regardless whether you have a sacred site, if it's just a single presence on a land, you can use this one to target 2 spaces away from that land. And I want to note that when it says 2 or 1, that also means 0. These are up to ranges, so you don't have to target absolutely 2 spaces away. It can be up to, and you can target the land that you're currently in. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about how some of these powers work. So this one's a slow power here, and it says to gather up one of your presents. All right, so let's talk about gathering and pushing for that matter. It's a mechanic that you use in this game. So anytime you gather, you target a land, okay? So let's say we targeted this land here, and we're using this card here. It says gather 1 presence. Then you're going to look at any bordering land, any adjacent land to that land you targeted, and you'll choose whatever you're gathering and bring it in. And now it does say up to, so you don't have to gather. And so in this particular case, if I targeted here, I can gather this presence into there. And that now gives me a presence there, but I lose the sacred site. Now, if this was already set up this way and I chose to gather and I gathered this presence into here, now making a sacred site, the next part happens here. This symbol here is fear, so I gain 1 fear, and when you gain fear, this drops down. But on top of that, I get to do 1 damage in that target land. And if there were invaders there, then I also have my sacred site power, which lowers the invader's health, so that 1 damage could actually do a lot of damage. And I'll show that to you in just a moment. Now, push works differently than gather. It's the opposite. You target a land and then you push something out of it. Let's say the card told me to push one of my presents from this land. So you would push it to one of the adjacent lands. And when it tells you can gather or push multiple things, with a gather, you can gather from multiple areas. Let's say it told me I can gather up to 4 Dahan. I can gather 1 here, 2 here, and 1 here into this land, if that was the case. And then if I needed to push invaders, I would push them out, and I could split them up if I wanted to. And so now I want to talk to you about damaging. So first of all, the invaders had different health. The single explorer here has 1 health and does 1 damage. The town has 2 health and does 2 damage. And the city has 3 health and does 3 damage. Now, when you do damage to an enemy, you can possibly destroy them. When you destroy a town or a city, you gain fear. With a town, you gain 1 fear, and the city, you gain 2 fear. But let me show you an example of damage. So let's say I had played this card, and this was the setup here, and I targeted this land to gather up 1 presence. So I gather this one into here. Now I have 2 of my presence in 1 land giving me the blistering heat ability, reducing their health by 1 to a minimum of 1. So this one doesn't get reduced at all, but this now has only 1 health. And on top of that, I would gain 1 fear, so we'd slide 1 fear down, and I do 1 damage. That means I could do 1 damage to this town right now and kill it off. And so that would grant me 1 fear as a bonus, and that would also prevent it from doing damage on a later ravage turn, which I'll explain momentarily. So that's just one way to do damage and gain fear. There are other ways, of course. And so let's talk about the innate power here. This is an extra power that you have as your spirit, and you can trigger it once per round, assuming you reach the threshold as shown here. See, it shows a bunch of elements that you have to play in order to be able to use this. And the way that works is you play cards from your hand, of course. Now, if I played these 2 cards right here, let's say these are my 2 cards for the round, then I would gain these elements as shown on here. These are a constant pool, so if you have multiple innate powers, both draw from that pool at the same time, they don't use up at all, so you don't have to keep track of how many you've used. They don't use up. So in this case here, I have 1 yellow, 1 orange, and 1 purple, and another orange and a purple. Now, if you'll notice, my first level of my innate power is I need 2 orange and 2 purple. And so this one lets me do 2 damage, but only to explorers. So if I have this threshold, if I had played these cards, then I would be able to gain that ability. Now, this particular innate power, it lets you keep gaining other abilities here. So if you actually have all of the elements at the bottom here. It covers all the thresholds for all of them. And you'll do all of this damage into one target land. This one is one space away from a sacred site. So you could actually do 2 damage to explorers, 2 more damage, 2 more damage, and then 1 damage to every invader. And you do those in order. And so you would do a massive amount of damage if you could pull that off. Now, as you can see, you need to play a lot of cards in order for that to happen. And that's at least 4 cards to make that happen. Because if you have this ability here, this gives you fire. Actually, it could be less if you have both of these fires here. So that would be 2 of the fires that you need. So it could be 3 cards if you could pull it off. And maybe we'll try that. Maybe I'll try to pull off that and go for a major win. All right, so let's talk about the invader phase here. First thing you do is you check to see if you've earned any fear cards. When you've gained 4 fear, like so, then you take a fear card and you're going to set that aside for when you get to the fear phase of the invader phase. You'll flip over that card and do the action depending on your current terror level. We're at terror level 1, so we'll do the top action. But if you get to terror level 3, you get to do the bottom action, and they get progressively more powerful. And I'll show you those when that actually happens. But the next thing you do is you do a ravage. And the invaders ravage, meaning they attack in the target land type. And so you'll look at that target land type and you'll look at the invaders. So if it was mountains, let's say, which it will be in a couple rounds. And so what you need to know is that the invaders always attack first unless a card power says otherwise. So here, this invader attacks. And what they do is they attack everything in it and the land. So multiple things can happen. If you have presence there, and they do 2 or more damage, then they will add a blight to a land. Anytime a blight is added to a land, you lose a presence, and that gets destroyed and removed, and you can't gain that presence back. On top of that, if they are attacking and there are Dahan there, they will attack both the land and the Dahan at the same time. So they will do 3 damage to the land, which adds a blight, and then 3 damage to the Dahan. So each Dahan has 2 health and 2 damage. Now, they don't do damage until after the invaders attack, unless the card says otherwise. So this one would lose 2 health, and they're always efficient. They try to kill off them as efficient as possible. And then this one gets damaged by 1, which flips it over and shows it's been damaged. So not only did the land take damage and gain a blight, but the Dahan took damage. Now, when there are Dahan left over after a ravage, they fight back and they do 2 damage, and you can allocate the damage as you will. But of course, in this case here, we'd likely do 2 damage to the town, getting rid of the town and gaining 1 fear. So that's largely how ravages go. Now, next on the list here is the build phase, and they'll build in the target land shown here. And in this case here, they're going to build in the mountains. And the way that works is if they have an explorer and no towns or cities, they'll add a town. If they have a town and no cities, they'll add a city. If they have a city and a town, then they'll add another town. If they have 2 towns and 1 city, they'll add another city, and so on. So you don't really want it to get that bad, but that's how that goes. And they'll do that in every land that they have invaders, and that's the target land. So if we don't deal with these here, they will build a town here and a city here during this build phase. And then the next thing you do is you flip over a card for the explore phase, which I showed you earlier when they explored into the mountains here. And then once you've completed these, all the invader cards advance. So the ravage goes to discard, the build becomes a ravage, the explorer becomes the next build. So you know what they're going to do the next round. And that's where this game comes in, and you have to plan for these things. So like the build here. We don't want them to build a city here. That will be very detrimental, so we may try to avoid that from happening. And then after the invader phase, we go into the slow power phase, which we play our slow powers, and our innate power is a slow power, so we have to keep that in mind. And so we're ready to start here, and so I have to pick a growth phase to start. And I think I want to start with this far right one, where I'm going to gain 1 power card, and we're going to add that to my hand, and that's Visions of Fiery Doom. This card here lets you push 1 explorer or town from a range of 0, and I can target any land, but it's a fast power. But if I have 2 fire, I gain an additional fear. So you gain possibly 2 fear there, so that's pretty good for me. And then now I get to add a presence to the land, and I think I will add 1 here, allowing me more card plays. I'll add it here to this land. And then next I'm going to gain an additional 2 energy, so the +2 +1 is going to gain me 3 energy. I'll place these here. And so the 2 cards I want to play are these cards here, the Stinging Sandstorm, and the new card that I got, the Visions of Fiery Doom. So I'll place these here. One's a fast power, one's a slow power, but they cost 1 energy each, and so I will pay that energy now. And so now we move on to the fast power. And so the Visions of Fiery Doom here, I get to target a land that I have presence in. The target 0 here means that I have to have presence there. And so I will gain 1 fear automatically. And then I can push 1 explorer or 1 town. I'm targeting this land here, this mountain, since I have presence here now. And I'm going to push this 1 town into this area here. Again, when you push whatever you're pushing into adjacent lands. And so I only get to push 1 thing, and I'll push it here. And if you notice here on this card, it says that I need 2 fire. I have 1 fire here and 1 fire here. And so I gain an additional fear. That's going to be really helpful because now I'm only 2 fear away from a fear card. And so now that my fast powers are done, we move on to the invader phase. We have no fear. There is no ravage right now, but now they build in the mountains. And so once again, if they just have an explorer in the mountains, they're going to build towns. And that's what happens here. And then next up, we have the explorer. And they're going to explore into the sands. And so from this city here, they explore into this sands, and from this city or this town here, they explore into that sands. And then we advance these cards along the track here, so next round they will be ravaging in the mountains and building in the sands. But now we have the slow powers, and I can gather 1 of my presence, but I have to target a land 1 space away, or up to 1 space away. I'm going to target this land here, gather 1 presence into it. Now I have a sacred site here, so this town actually only has 1 health. And this tells me here that I gain 1 fear, and then I can do 1 damage in that land. I will do 1 damage to this town, destroying it. And that will gain me 1 more fear, and at this point I have gained enough to gain a fear card, and we'll set this aside here. I don't get to see that until the fear stage of the next round. And at this point here, we are done with all the powers. And the time passes. If anything had still damage on it, it would remove that damage. And on top of that, we discard our cards here. Now I can't use these cards until the next time I reclaim cards. And so now we're back to the beginning of the round, and I choose a growth action, and I'm going to do the middle growth action. And I need to put 2 presents on the board. I think I'll put both of these here. That'll give me more energy each turn. So both of these are going to go on the board. The first one is going to go, I think, up here. Yeah, I'm going to plan for up there. And then the second one, I will add to here. I think what I'll do is I'll make my sacred sites down stacked so you can see that I have 2 in those areas. And so now I gain energy. So I'm going to gain 2 energy here because that's my energy now. And I can play 2 cards. I'll play both of these. These are both fast powers. This one costs 0. This one costs 2. So that'll cost that 2 energy I just gained. And now we're ready for the fast power stage. So the first one here is target spirit gains 2 energy, or target spirit may pay 1 energy to do 1 damage in 1 of their lands. I definitely want to pay the 1 energy because I want to do damage here. Since I have a sacred site, this only has 1 health, so it dies and I gain a fear for that. That'll also prevent a build of a city in this space here. And so this next card here, I have to target a land up to 2 spaces from my sacred site. I'm going to target this land here that I have a sacred site in, gaining 1 fear, and then I skip up to 1 ravage or build action. So what you do here is you place 1 of your tokens to remind you that you have a special action going on in that area. In this case here, I will be able to skip the build in this area that'll prevent a town from building. Now, if you'll notice here, I do have 2 orange and 2 purple elements, which means I can use this innate power, but that's a slow power, so we will get that during the slow power stage. And so now we move on to the invader phase, and the first thing we do is we reveal our fear card. And so here's what a fear card looks like. Now it shows you what stage you're in, 1, 2, or 3. I am in stage 1. And it says each player removes 1 explorer or 1 town from a land where it's the only invader. Now, if it was more powerful, the stage 3, each player removes an invader from a land with 2 or fewer invaders. So, for me, I think I could remove an explorer here, but I'm already preventing the build. But how about if I remove this explorer here? That'll prevent a build in this section. And so that's done. And then you just discard this card. All right, now we go on to the Ravage phase. So they're going to be attacking in the mountains. So right here, this invader is going to do 1 damage to the land. Now, in order for them to do anything, they need to do at least 2 damage to add a blight to the land. So they do nothing. So nothing really happens there. But here, they will do a total of 3 damage, adding these together to the land, which will add a blight to the land. And it will kill off 1 Dahan, because that's 2 damage there, and damage the other Dahan. Now it only has 1 health left. But that Dahan is going to fight back. It's not too happy about that. It'll kill off this Tan because it does 2 damage to it, and that will give us 1 more fear. And now we go on to the build phase here, and they don't have anything here to build, and I prevented a build there, so that is done. And next we have the explore phase, and they will explore into the wetlands. And both of these wetlands will get explored. They also explore from the ocean too. I forgot to mention that. So any of the border here with the white line, that's the coast, that they'll explore into there. So effectively, it explores into the wetlands here, and the city explores into this wetlands there. And then we're going to advance all of these cards here. So next turn, they are going to attack in the sands, and they only have an explorer there. So I don't even have to worry about the sands the next turn. But I do want to try and prevent builds and other things in the wetlands. And now we have a slow power phase, and I do have the ability to do 2 damage up to 1 space away to explorers only. And I think my best option is probably this one here. It's 1 space away from a sacred site, and I think we'll destroy that one so that prevents a build and I can focus here. Because no matter what, the build's going to happen here. I don't think I can destroy a city this turn. All right, so now time is going to pass. We're going to flip this Dahan back over and discard these cards. Now here we are with a new round. The only problem is I only have 1 card to use. So I definitely want to do the growth option here of reclaiming cards. So I reclaim all my used cards back to my hand. I will gain a power card. So the top card of that deck is now the Drought. Now Drought is an interesting card. It has a range of 1. It does destroy 3 towns. 1 damage to each town and city, and add a blight. And then if you have 3 of the yellow, you'll destroy a city as well. This is pretty detrimental card because you're adding blight, but you can do a lot of stuff here. So you have to time this one and make it worth it. And on top of that, it's a slow power too, so it really requires timing. And then I gain a bonus energy here, plus the 2 from my normal gain, and there's 3 now. So one thing I want to talk about is a little bit of strategy. So right now, this wetlands is really in a bad place, you know. It has an explorer, a city. It's going to build a town because it's building this turn. Then next turn, it's going to be in the Ravage, so it's going to be doing a ton of damage there. I don't have any defend cards. There are cards that allow you to defend the land by a certain amount of damage. I don't have any of those right now. So I have to consider other options when dealing with this. I may just let them do the damage there and deal with them later and build up my presence across the board otherwise. So my focus right now might be on gaining fear. I think that's going to be a better option for me. So I think I'm going to play these 2 cards. The Stinging Sandstorm and the Visions of Fiery Doom. Same cards that I've played previously. This will cost me 2 energy. And so now I get to do the Visions of Fiery Doom, targeting a space that is a range of 0. And so I'll target this one here, and I'm going to push this Explorer into the jungle here. But I also gain 1 fear from that top part of the action here. So that gains me another fear card, and that's really good. That's going to put me in a good position. But on top of that, I do have 2 orange elements to trigger the bottom part of this. So I gain another fear on that. Now we go on to the Invader phase, and we have a fear card now. So we didn't have that before, so that's very useful. So we're going to flip this over, and it says, defend 3 in all coastal lands. Well, how about that? It's not going to really help me this turn. I wish I had this the next Invader phase, but oh well, that would have been nice. And even though a fear card doesn't help you, you are still burning through the fear deck, and you can win by clearing out the fear deck, but also the win condition changes as you power up through the fear deck. So keep that in mind. And next they're going to ravage in the sands, and there's nothing in the sands to ravage, so that's done. And then they're going to build in the wetlands, and they can only build in this wetlands here. Since there is a city but no town, they're going to build a town. And so now they have quite the fortification there. And next up, they're going to explore, and they'll explore into the sands. So we add one here and here, exploring from these cities and towns here. And so all these cards advance along the track. So as a reminder, they will be attacking in the wetlands and building in the sands next turn. All right, for my Stinging Sandstorm, I need to target a space one space away, and I'll target this one here, gathering a presence into it, and then gaining one fear, doing one damage here, getting rid of this invader. I don't gain fear from the explorers here. And then also I have my slow power here, where one space away from a sacred site, I can do 2 damage to invaders only. I will use this land to target this one here, killing off this invader, and this will prevent a build in the following turn. Okay, time is going to pass here, and we'll discard these. And then I'm going to choose the middle option here to add a presence to sands or mountains. I'm going to add 1 on each track, 1 here to this sands, and 1 here to this sands. And so now we have sacred sites in both of those areas. And then now we gain 3 energy, so I'm able to build up a little bit more energy here. And I'm going to use these 2 cards, the Sweltering Exhaustion and Gift of Searing Heat. That'll cost me a total of 2 energy. Now we move on to the fast phase. And so the first thing here, I can target a land from 1 space away from a sacred site and stop a ravage. Well, let's do that here. We'll prevent the ravage from happening, and they'll prevent a blight from being added to the land. On top of that, I gain 1 fear. And then this next one here says I can gain 2 energy or pay an energy to do 2 damage, or 1 damage, sorry. And so I am going to pay the 1 energy, and I'll do 1 damage to this land here, or this explorer here, and that'll prevent the build in the sands. Now, as you can see, I'm building up to handle things in the future actions. That's how you get ahead in Spirit Island, is you got to deal with what's coming ahead. You can't play defense all the time. All right, so now it's the invaders' turn. We don't have any fear cards, so we go straight into Ravage. I prevented the Ravage here, so that is done. And there's nothing else to ravage. This wetlands has nothing in it. And this next one here is build in the sands, but there's nothing in the sands, so nothing happens there. And so we just have an explorer, and the explorer is into the wetlands again. And so we'll explore from the coast there and there. Again, from this city into there. And then we have to advance these cards, so they move right along here. Now, if you're wondering what these symbols are here, these symbols are for an advanced difficulty. In Horizons of Spirit Island, if you want to up the difficulty, there's an ability that happens when these cards come into play. In the original Spirit Island, these cards refer to special adversaries and actions that they do, and that's another way to really up the difficulty. I will not be showcasing any of that during this playthrough. All right, so the last thing is the slow powers, and I actually do have a slow power. I have 2 orange and 2 purple, which means I can target a land 1 space away from a sacred site, do 2 damage to explorers only. Well, that's really useful because I can actually do that to this land here. And so we'll destroy both of these explorers. All right, so time is passing. We'll discard these cards and move on to the next round. And for this next round here, I am going to do the 3rd option here of gaining a power card. So first I gain this power card here, and it's Purifying Flame, and it targets a land 1 space away from a sacred site, dealing 1 damage per blight there. And if target land is mountain or sands, you may instead remove 1 blight. So that could be really useful. I have 1 blight here, and 1 here. So I definitely want to consider using that. And then I get to add a presence, and I'm going to add this one here because I actually want to play 3 cards this turn, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So we are going to add 1 presence, and where do I want to place it? I guess I'll place it here in the wetlands. It's 1 space away. I'll gain an extra 2 energy from that growth option plus the 3 from my income. So I have a lot of energy going on here. Now I get to play 3 cards, so check this out. I'm going to play all 3 of these. You know what the cool thing about this is? I'm playing Drought. And if you remember, Drought destroys a city if you have 3 yellow elements. And I do. I actually have a lot of elements going on here. So we'll see what I can accomplish with this. I actually have a few things going on. This is actually going to be really, really, really good turn. So let's try this out. So I do have to pay the 3 energies, 1 each, and these are all slow power. So I am doing nothing at the beginning of this round. We're going straight into the invader phase. We don't have any fear cards right now, and they're gonna ravage. And so they're gonna ravage in the sands, but nothing's there. So then they're gonna build. They're gonna build in the wetlands, and they're gonna add a town to each of these here. And then next thing up, they're going to explore, and they will explore into the coastal lands. When they explore into the coastal lands, it's all 3 lands that are on the coast. So 1 explore here, 1 explore here, 1 explore here. Something to keep in mind with that is that when this goes to build, they'll build in all 3 of those. And when it goes into ravage, they'll ravage on all 3 of those. So you really have to plan for that. All right, so now we're going to advance the invader cards here. And let's see how this goes. So I have all these slow powers, and I have my innate power. If you notice, I have 3 orange and 2 of the earth. I actually have 3 of the earth with this here. But I can actually do this 2 damage to a land. And so we got some good things going on here. First, let's start off with drought. So drought is going to target a space 1 space away from my presence. So we'll target this one here. And then it's going to destroy 3 towns. Okay, well, there, we destroyed 2. So that gives us 2 fear, 1 fear now, which gives us a fear card and increases the terror level. And then a 2nd fear, because that's what we gained from the 2nd town. Are you ready to win the game here? So see, now the victory condition has changed. We need to get rid of towns and cities. But let's continue with what's going on here with this drought card. See, it's going to add a blight to the land and do 1 damage to the city. But that's not going to matter because I have 3 of the yellow elements. So it will destroy that city, doing 2 more fear for me. Now, if you look here, I only have 1 town left. And so check this out. I get to do 2 damage, 1 space away from a sacred site. 2 damage. Boom. We gain another fear card. But now that I've reached the victory condition of no towns and no cities, well, I've won the game. that was awesome. That was a lot of fun. I actually really like the spirit. It's quite fun. It's a little on the easier side of spirit, so hopefully that's helpful to you. But yeah, that was a fun combo of actions. I never played the spirit before, so I liked how all the cards lined up and everything. That was great. And so there you have it. That was a tutorial and solo playthrough of Horizons of Spirit Island. Feel free to ask me any questions or point out any rules errors I may have made in the comments. Let me know what you think of the game and the playthrough and all that. I hope you notice how powerful slow powers can be. It sounds great to have fast powers and be able to do stuff right away. But if you can time those slow powers the right way, then you can do some devastating powers and effects on the board and change the board state greatly. So keep that in mind. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel if you like the content you see here. And if you want to support me on Patreon, I have a link in the description, and I thank everybody who has supported me thus far. And I thank you very much for watching me on Tabletop for One. Have a great night.